Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and I wanted to go ahead and cover the upcoming year's releases that were shared by CIG and talk about what you can expect to have come. Now, it is worth pointing out before we get into this that the dates on everything here is likely to change based on progress or issues that they hit. Things either may come out sooner, some things may come out later, but this is what they have planned now internally, and this is what they're kind of aiming for. So before we get into everything that's included, and man, it is a ton, I want to go ahead and hit you with what didn't make the cut. Now keep in mind, just because it isn't listed doesn't mean it's not happening this year. It just means that they don't have it clearly mapped out at this point. A good example is anything non-combat or cargo from a job gameplay perspective isn't clearly listed here. Now we have some items that may be tied to that, but nothing specific. So we know that from hearing from CR and reading the most recent letter from the chairman, piracy and bounty hunting and escorting are all coming soon. So the lack of information here is a good reminder that if you don't see it, it doesn't mean that it's not coming. Another thing that's not listed is the 300i rework, which I think bummed a lot of people out. And actually not just 300i, the whole 300 line. For me, it was not seeing the Redeemer listed anywhere, even with a lot of other ships released much after. Now, I'm hoping it's going to sneak in there somewhere because you all know I'm pumped up for the Redeemer, but we'll have to just wait and see. Now, there wasn't any news regarding the Delta Patcher either, so we'll just have to see. I think that's something they were getting pretty close to on development, so that may be something that Turbulent's putting in place that may not have been included in this guideline, even though there are some comments about Spectrum there. Now, for those of you who haven't seen the dates, we're estimating June 5th through June 15th for the Evocati group, June 16th through the 28th for a larger scale PTU, and a 3.0 full release by June 30th. By the way, before we jump into this, I've already covered the ships that are upcoming and kind of what that schedule looks like. So while they are included in what CIG did, I'm not reviewing them here again. So if you want to see that video, it's like one video prior to this one. Now, as far as locations that we can expect to see in the verse for 3.0, we will have to assume that all of these dates are going to end up final and we don't really run into any other snags. So making it into 3.0, we're looking at moons, primarily Crusaders 3 moons being finished already. Targeting April 7th. Delamar and the landing site of Levski are scheduled to be under work now, finishing June 1st. And even though Chris stated that this is a stretch goal for 3.0, and outposts on the surface of moons like we've seen tested and slated, they're scheduled to be finished up by June 2nd. So I feel pretty good about those actually making it in. So those are the locations that we should expect to most likely see. We're not getting the full-on, Stanton system. Others on the schedule that aren't going to make the cut when we first release would be the truck stop station coming in August. ArcCorp is scheduled to finish up in June. Hurston and Crusader are finishing up in late November. And Microtech is coming in February of 2018. Now, Chris stated in his letter that he was really pushing to get all the planets and full Stanton system in place for 3.0, but they'd rather give us something 6 months sooner than everything 6 months later, and that's something that I'm happily going to take. That's especially true when the latest letter for the chairman, he mentioned that to drive in a straight line and circumnavigate the moon of Selen on a Dragonfly, it would take 4.5 hours. And that's nuts, especially considering the size of that moon is pretty small, but it's also something that's really exciting, meaning that there's going to be a lot to explore and occupy our time with, even if we don't have the full system to play with. Now, the next bit that I wanted to break down a little bit is labeled as AI on their schedule, but ultimately, to me, it really looks to be tied to the mission system more than anything else. And I think the best way to review this would be in the light of missions from start to finish, as in what the mission entails, how you keep track of it, having that gameplay being in place, and how you find out about that mission in the first place, i.e. mission givers or artificial intelligence. So out of these, there's really only 2 that will certainly make the estimated June release for 3.0, and that's going to be the new mission system and mission manager app. Now, the mission system is the framework all of the missions are built on, and the mission manager app is the new layer of functionality built into your Mobi-Glass. After that, we start to get into new mission types being added, like FPS ambush missions on planets, piracy missions, and recovery missions. Those should all make an appearance in August. That may include going on missions on planets where you get ambushed, or maybe ones where you need to set up an ambush. Piracy is pretty straightforward, and recovery is likely going to be the kind of that first iteration of search and rescue, or potentially even picking up items that were left behind. Now, when I say things that are probably going to make it into the game, you know, if something's slated for August and there's not a release until September, they're not going to just be layering all of these things in. It's going to take time, and you're going to need to get those full releases. So maybe once the Delta patcher comes in, we start seeing things integrate a little bit faster, but keep the dates here are when they're estimating completion, not necessarily when they're estimating them being into the game. Okay, so past that, we're going to have patrol missions showing up in September, which is probably going to be taking up missions, patrolling an area looking for vandal or pirates or really any threats, and then finding ways to deal with them or maybe just notifying authorities. October should be pretty busy with assassination missions showing up, which is probably an unlawful type of mission created to give those of you with bad reps more to do, and so will Piracy Part 2. Transport missions show up in late October as far as the timeline is concerned, and it is worth noting that cargo is expected to be in the game well before that point. So this is really just about how you get specific missions and cargo, not the ability to transport. That's going to be on earlier. Along the same lines of transport would be smuggling, again on the unlawful side, coming in the middle of November, and defense missions coming in late November. Now, defense missions is pretty vague, so that could include planetary outpost defense, defending convoys, really anything. And then finally, in late December, they have a second round of patrol missions set to be completed. Now, the one I skipped over is in the middle of November, and it's an AI system called Cooperative Avoidance. And while I don't know for sure, I don't believe this is going to be a type of mission. I think this is probably an AI skill set that they're putting in place to avoid collisions, either in busy ship areas or in combat, or even on foot. You know, when you're in a busy area like Area 18, you know, you don't want to be colliding with NPCs, and this is probably about how they intelligently avoid you. Now, that's a hunch, but I think it seems pretty logical. Now, in the FPS category, we're looking at handling items, interacting, some animation stuff, and obviously a lot of combat things. So in the short term, and likely to make it into 3.0 release, we've got the shouldered weapons, probably refocusing on animations and controlling long rifles, including bigger things like the shoulder railgun, armed combat with a weapon, so maybe melee types of attacks, working on interacting with items and cargo with the pickup and carry system, stamina, and that's going to really impact how far you can sprint. And that will be impacted by the type of armor that you have on and probably how many different types of weapons you're carrying. Fist fighting mechanics, which is pretty funny and going to be really interesting to see how that's developed. And the planetary ambush setup that we talked about before. So that may include hiding and cover mechanics as well. Now, past that, we get into items that are probably coming after 3.0's initial release, including the female player movement and overall locomotion, as well as throwable weapons like knives and maybe big rocks. I don't know, but those are slated to come in July. Some of the repair and restock work is hopefully being done to allow you to work on ships and vehicles. Knife melee attack is coming, which could be fun for stealth kills. All, again, slated to be scheduled in July. Now, there is more coming in August focused on hand-to-hand combat, including takedown mechanics as well as knockdown and knockbacks. September brings bumps, whatever that ends up being, maybe intentionally bumping into other players, I don't know. And October is bringing down to state, which I believe is probably going to be the recovery process once you are knocked down or takedown, as well as having the ability to inspect items coming around that same time frame. So it's probably similar to what you can do in shops today, but I would have to guess it's probably more detailed and controlled in the way that you actually go about that inspection. It's probably not an automated, I'm going to flip the rifle this way and this way. It's probably giving you the control to move it around. Finally, November is set to give some pretty interesting ones, including looting permissions, which I think is going to open up gameplay to swipe goods, but may also be part of the system that you put in place to allow players to lock and secure items, or maybe even some of the loaning permissions that end up getting put into place. And finally, some gadgets and drones being implemented. Now, that's a little bit vague, but I think drones would be pretty helpful for planetary scouting and exploration. I don't think we're talking about large-scale ship drones, considering we're talking in the FPS category. Now, up next, we're going to discuss what they call the gameplay section, and boy, it covers a lot. So coming in May, we're going to be getting a completed user interface for kiosks, meaning that shopping and other tasks are going to be easier without interaction of a shopkeeper. As part of Item System 2.0 continuing, we're going to see the power and supply lines being put into place on ships, which should probably be more intuitive on how restrictions are put into place to maybe say you can't put a giant weapon on this hardpoint because of these systems. AI turrets are getting some love, so hopefully that means how we interact with the AI that are actually in our turrets, not just AI and AI ships. Insurance is making an appearance in May as well, meaning that persistence continues to move forward, and we may get a new idea of how it feels to lose and have to replace your ship and wait for it and pay for things that weren't covered as far as your overall insurance, maybe how we're going to have to pay for it month to month. So that's going to be interesting to see how that gets implemented. Now, there will be a new item system 2.0 in place, and I think this is in reference to how you interact with doors, your cockpit, and other items, because I can't figure out anything else there that really makes a lot of sense, so I think that's what we've seen teased as far as some of that inner thought system in a way. Derelict ships are going to be more prevalent and ideally giving you more options to do with them. So doors and airlocks in stations and basically everywhere are getting another pass. And finally in May, a surprise to me, character customization, allowing you to start to get control over the appearance of your character, even if it does start rudimentary, is an awesome and surprising entry into the game. Now, we do know that there's a bank of characteristics that you can build from, so it's likely going to start pretty simple and say, you can add this type of clothing, you can change this nose on this face or this color hair, etc. Okay, May gives us some engineering updates in the game engine as well, focusing on kiosks and cargo, as well as improving how the IFCS in your ship is going to handle the landing approach, which is great because it only works occasionally, is really wonky right now, and sometimes it makes me move forward when I'm trying to land, and blah, blah, blah. So landing, getting another work is a good thing. You'll also see work completing on the inventory system as far as the user interface is concerned. So that's probably a combo of things that you can physically see in your ship, cargo hold, Moby glass, and it's probably going to start to kind of present you with ways that you can interact with these different items. Fuel is being added into the system in a more advanced level of integration as part of Item System 2.0. Elevators are getting a second pass, and manned turrets are starting to get a rework for real players. I'm guessing a lot of that is directly tied to the improvements that were covered in an ATV long ago, but it's going to be interesting to see because we all know that turrets desperately need some work. More on persistence is taking place, and we should see scanner improvements by the end of June, hopefully giving us the control that we've seen teased over how far we can scan and with what level of focus and that player control, and then that overall just ping type of scan. July sees airlocks getting a second pass, and August we see armor components being added. Now, I'm not sure if that includes ship armor, body armor, or both, or just how the engine registers armor, but something is happening with armor. One of the more interesting and scary components being added in August is the item degradation, fail, and luck. Now, luck is a really hard thing to produce in a game, so we'll need to see what that initial pass looks like. But that's where things like weapon ratings and manufacturer reputation are probably going to start to be more present and may justify some of the ship pricing that we have in place today that may not make sense at this point as far as how ships are performing. Criminal status is going to be more developed in August, and we get the first service beacons, which I'm hoping includes like help, pickup, fuel request, those types of things. In September, we're starting to see some really interesting things when it comes to ships and how they handle damage, including a ship breaking update. Now, I'm hoping this ends up taking on two forms, one being disablement, i.e. shooting components to stop the ship from functioning, and two, actually breaking a ship in half from damage. I don't know what all's included in that, but I'm hoping that's a part of it. Past that, we also see some new overheating mechanics making their way into the game, which I assume is tied to ships and the item system ports, but it could refer to players on hot surfaces as well. Past that, we get the second iteration of cargo coming online in October, allowing for security access control, which likely has to deal with locking down your ship and possessions, and how you get to interact and allow others to actually interact with your stuff, as well as some work being done for ammo types, probably on FPS and ship weapons as well. So maybe we start seeing armor penetrating rounds, or normal rounds, or flak rounds, or those types of things. We do get the second version of service beacons coming online in November, probably taking on more complicated things like offering jobs, interacting with stations, like those types of things. And speaking of interacting with stations, that's something that's going to be put into place. And I think that's going to be talking about things like mission giving or landing request or accepting services. And an exciting item that's being added for you Starfarer owners is ship-to-ship refueling is going to come online in December, along with some other updates to restocking and repairing. So I think we're going to continue to see these things developing and giving people more and more things to do. When it comes to graphics, we're looking at volumetric fog, engine trails and contrails, and debris fields all being completed prior to June. The holographic shader is seeing some work done and should be finished in June, and I believe that's going to be improving the visuals for how things look like on the mobi-glass screens and various displays and advertisements and how that all appears in-game. Distant star fields, or basically looking at a star cluster from a long distance, is set to be completed in August, and October looks busy with them wrapping up the sun shader. We're also in October going to see GPU Particles Part 2 and Gas Clouds all completed that month. Now, December gets more focused on planets, working on the gas giant technology, probably dealing with how you can actually visualize the experience of flying through parts of them, and how things like your ship interact with that environment, and then things like planetary rings and gas giants as far as the overall visual appearance of those. Now, in the weapons department, the P-8SC Ballistics SMG is set to be completed in April, and then we're also getting reworks to the Arrowhead Gallant and Devastator all wrapping up in May. June should be pretty exciting because we're getting the shoulder-mounted railgun, and it's going to make its first appearance at that point. There is a heavy machine gun that's going to be in development, and that should be available starting in August, which is pretty cool considering that's the first of that weapon type in the game. And then the long-awaited Soda crossbow is going to be making its appearance, slated to be completed in November. So that'll be interesting to see how that fits into all of this. You know, I could see something like explosive bolts making a lot of sense, but a normal one obviously is going to be a little bit more stealthy, but we'll see. It's an interesting item to have added. From ship weapons, we're looking at a distortion scattergun having its modular sets completed in July for sizes 4 through 6. Now keep in mind that distortion is in the disablement category. It's supposed to overload your power plant. So this could be a very cool weapon for police and pirates alike. August is going to bring a ballistic scattergun modular set from Apocalypse Arms in sizes 1 through 3. September should wrap up the modular sets for Omnisguises from size 1 through 6, which is interesting. And remember, these modular sets are basically taking the components of a weapon, the design and themes of the weapons, and making them easily scalable to be appropriate for different ships and different sizes. So this should allow for more options and flexibility between ships, weapon sizes, and possible loadouts. We see the neutron cannon set sizes 1 through 3 should be done in November, and December brings a pretty interesting mention that I haven't heard or seen anything about, but it's modular sets for a plasma beams sizes 1 through 6. Now, I haven't seen any mention of a beam weapon to date from the manufacturer, so I'm not really sure what to expect other than what I can infer from other games, being that it probably has high heat creation, high power plant requirements, but does a hell of a lot of damage if it's sustained on target. Now, the last two areas that I want to cover are probably the most important overall, with those being core tech and network or backend. Now, these are what is going to give us the ability to really enjoy things on a larger scale with better stability, more players, and better performance, and is really the foundation for everything else. Now, there's a lot of work dealing with object containers, and if you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically the system that's going to be used in-game to render and show only what you need to based on your current situation and location without sacrificing performance of the game engine in the server. So focusing on that, they're planning to have the streaming for your client with the containers starting May 11th, and then working to get the coding into the server side to manage that implementation by July 12th. Past that, coming in August, we're looking to get streaming to subsumption integration in place, which I take to mean the AI manager can then begin to kind of tap into the container system for a more dynamic and better performing events, but I'm really not sure. In November, they're going to have two container systems planned, one being asynchronous container loading, which I believe means that they're going to be using a signal from the client that some sort of event has been completed and it's time to react in a certain way. And they're also putting into place some cinematic tool integrations for containers, which probably relates to how these things are going to end up being displayed in a way that's better than them just randomly appearing or giving control over to the developers. There's going to be something there that makes things a little bit smoother, I believe. In December, they plan to streamline the container system again, and in January, they're going to work to put in some developer workflow improvements, basically giving them a better way to work through their development and implementation into the servers. Now, in regards to the network, we're looking to see serialized variables completed in early May and session management finishing up in mid-May, which hopefully is going to make things more congruent and consistent between logs. The messaging system is getting some work, and we should see a new message queue in place by May 22nd, but I think the question to ask here is if these are going to be messages we'll see about missions in the mobi glass, or if they're going to be messages from players, which is the one I think it's going to be. There are a few solar system pieces that are being addressed. First, finishing in late April is the shop service, which is probably putting into place the kiosk and shopkeepers and more complete experience in the back end in regards to that mission service. And I think that's going to really be the foundation which everything as far as the shopping and mission systems are, being done. Speaking of the mission service, it's scheduled to finish on May 12th and is likely going to be tied to the Mobi-Glass and tracking of different events. Network tokens are scheduled for May 31st, which I believe is tied to how you hold your place when joining an instance and how it verifies who you are in some sort of authentication process. And we get network bind, unbind in late June, probably also tied to how you're swapping between instances and with log in and log out of the servers. And then moving past that, we get server migration, again, probably with how you're being handed between instances, if those that were present at that time. And that's scheduled to finish in the middle of July. Finally, we're looking at parties and groups getting functionality adjustments at the end of September, and this is probably including the Spectrum integration and overall interface that is going to allow you to deal with playing with friends and orgmates a lot easier. Other significant things that are coming and impacting gameplay starts with a really popular one that is in high demand, and that's being the field of view slider coming May 5th. That should allow you to adjust your overall experience on foot and in cockpit, and I know that many are wanting a wider field of view, so rejoice, that should be in place for 3.0. Important for 3.0, we get atmospheric entry coding and graphics wrapping up development in early May, and important for the long-term, persistent damage, ammo, and missile counts between session is coming to an end of development at the end of May, meaning that when you log in, you're going to have exactly what you had when you logged out, regardless if you're talking damage, fuel, ammo, etc. Now, around that same time frame, we get the Entity Owner Manager, which is going to help tie all of your possessions to you as a character, and an update to Planetary Tech's Solar System tool, and Entity Update Component Scheduler by May 31st. Now, we do start to see more of the Spectrum integration happening in July, where we begin to use Spectrum for in-game chat, which in my mind is probably not going to be that different from an in-game experience, but the tech behind it is probably going to be powered by Spectrum, opening up for the possibility of integration between in and out of game in late August. Shields are getting a rework, probably focusing on controlling them, the effects when they're getting damaged, the recharge rates, and overall balance. That's happening in early August. And Room System 2.0 is getting a patch in August as well. NPC generation, which is likely how the NPCs are going to be entering the world and the universe around us, is going to be coming in September, and that's more important than most realize because the persistent universe feels empty now. But once we get more NPCs present, especially those that aren't trying to kill you, it's going to feel a lot more alive. Now, there was one listed called Spawn Bundles that's scheduled for December, and I think that's probably tied to NPCs as well, and probably how we see those characters appearing in bulk, but it could very well be tied to item generation as well. Save game is slated for late November, which I think is probably tied to Squadron, but it could be the way that you log in and out of the game and how you come back in without too much incident. And finally, we see that they are planning implementation for the compression of your landing gear once your ship sets down, and that should be done in December. Woo! So I just covered a lot of information. And some of that is clearly defined in my mind, but some of that is really more my impressions based on what I'm taking from the labels. Now, I'm positive that some of that is wrong, but I tried to give you my best guess based on what I know is happening and about their development. Now, I said it at the beginning, and I'm saying it again, these dates are their internal estimates, which means that a delay or a hurdle somewhere is going to push these dates back. And they aren't always able to forecast those, even though they probably build in a little bit of time for those. Now, additionally, a delay to one item is likely going to take resources to fix that, which is going to push another delay somewhere else. So item A may end up pushing item B back. So it's a bit like a domino situation. Either way, this was a big step in transparency from CIG, and I commend them for opening up and sharing this with all of us. And it does give a lot of appreciation for what they're doing when you see the scale of all the things that are going on concurrently. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have questions, hit the comment section. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for a whole lot more development talk as we move forward. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.